is my review of the Sony a7RII Mark II. This review is not a detailed by the numbers versus other cameras review. This review is a summary of my feelings on the camera after using it for a month, 2 weeks shooting landscapes in Iceland, and a couple weddings. To start, I want to talk about what excited me prior to getting my hands on this camera. The 42 megapixel backside illuminated sensor. Now, I don't get especially excited about specific technologies in a sensor, but I was really impressed with Samsung's NX1 APS-C size sensor that is also backside illuminated. Its low light performance is fantastic, and now here is a high megapixel full frame sensor using the same technology. I also really was excited about the ability to record 4K video internally. It's useful for the work I do for this channel, the travel vlogs, and just provides me some additional flexibility that I appreciate. The in-body image stabilization also goes nicely along with that 4K video recording. That's great for quick clips being stabilized that I'm recording. It also gives me additional flexibility at weddings in lower light. I can shoot with a fast prime and have that fast prime stabilized. Another point I was excited about is the reportedly improved autofocus system with excellent AF accuracy and speed with Canon glass. Previous Sony a7 series cameras, the autofocus system was noticeably slower than the 5D Mark III that I usually shoot with, and when using an adapter and Canon glass, focus became painfully slow. So the idea of being able to use my nice Canon lenses and not reinvesting, or at least gradually migrating to Sony lenses, is really appealing. Wi-Fi is another feature I was excited about. Many cameras have it these days. I want to be able to both remotely control video, including autofocus and start and stop, and easily share photos on the go. It's fun. The EVF, or electronic viewfinder, is another feature that I was excited about. The ability to see your exposure in real time along with a histogram, and the fact that this EVF is actually the biggest of any current digital camera, or has the highest magnification. It's bright, it's beautiful, and it's fantastic to see what you're getting. Along with that is the articulating screen, which is mostly used for shooting landscapes, but I find it useful at weddings too when I want to shoot at an odd angle and don't have to or don't want to cram my face up against the camera. Now, there are a few items that I was worried about, including the autofocus system. It sounded a bit too good to be true, especially in low light where I spend a lot of my times at weddings. Another issue that I knew from using previous Sony cameras is that battery life is bad. And thinking about shooting a 12-hour wedding, I was worried about the number of batteries I would have to bring and whether that would even be a viable option. I was also concerned about the robustness of the camera. I know my 5D Mark III can survive the abuse a professional photographer might throw at it. Does this smaller Sony stand up to similar abuse in daily use? I was also concerned about the control scheme. With my Canon, I have a dedicated button for just about everything, and I am very comfortable using the camera. With this smaller body on the Sony and fewer customizations and fewer manual buttons, could I be as happy? Another issue is Sony as a company. It's harder to articulate this thought without rambling somewhat, but without the track record that Canon or Nikon has, you can just never be sure whether or not Sony is going to go in the direction you want them. Maybe they're going to introduce a new mount and leave an old one behind. But then again, I bought this camera because I'm not entirely satisfied with Canon's direction, or maybe not direction, but just speed of the direction. A few additional worries. Overheating. We've got reports of some users being limited to approximately 15 minutes of recording time, either in direct sunlight or warmer conditions, before the camera overheats and shuts down. And we've also got this issue of the lossy RAW files. I've been mostly dismissive of all the internet chatter about the RAW files being lossy or compressed, but I will say it's annoying to spend this much on a camera and not have lossless RAW files. I think Sony should update the firmware to provide an option for lossless and let the users decide if they want faster performance with lossy files or slower performance with lossless. I do think you would see a fairly noticeable slowdown in this camera if you make it write the full uncompressed files. But you know, the implications of this seem slight for most people, and clearly it didn't keep me from buying this camera. how has it all translated in real-world use over the last month? Well, the 42 megapixel sensor is excellent. I'm really happy with the ISO performance, the lack of noise in the shadows. Even as you boost exposure in Lightroom, it is wonderful. This low light performance coupled with that in-body image stabilization really provides some fantastic, very low light photos without worrying about handshake or excessive noise in the image. And you can even leave the tripod at home for some shots. I've been able to successfully handhold shots as slow as 1/4 of a second. The 4K video works well. I appreciate that I can hit record at any time and be shooting great looking footage. And again, the stabilization in the body is enough for shorter handheld shots, so I can leave the monopod or tripod at home and travel lighter. But this is one area where battery life is a serious issue. If you're someone looking to mostly use this camera for video, you're going to be draining batteries quickly, and you probably do need to worry about the overheating issues, which seem to crop up when shooting 4K with in-body image stabilization on, or shooting longer clips in warmer conditions. But for my needs, as a camera that can shoot 4K clips, it's been working well. I have shot clips as long as 30 minutes, but I've used tripod or monopod in those situations and haven't run into any overheating issues. I've also powered the camera from a USB battery often to give me a little bit more time, but I recognize that that isn't ideal for anyone. Again, if you're a dedicated video shooter, I would wait and see what the A7S Mark II brings. The autofocus system is as good as they say. It is a significant step forward, and it's amazing when I think about where I was a year ago walking around with the A7R. With or without adapters, the focus was slow, and with adapters, it was painfully slow. And now here we've got a system that in good light or low light matches or beats my 5D Mark III when using native lenses. The eye and face detection work and work well. It's really fun to watch those little boxes dance around the screen, locking on to registered faces, and the accuracy is spot on. No more back or front focusing issues. However, the reality of using the Sony with adapters and Canon glass is not as rosy or wonderful a picture as some people have painted. I've used my 24-70 f2.8 and 70-200 f2.8 with very good results in the center. It's accurate, it's fast, but as you start to stray from the center, it really starts to hunt and slow down. Now, this is not so much a review of the Sony, but rather adapters and non-native glass. It's something I'm getting a lot of questions about, so I wanted to address and share that in this video. I do have a separate video about some of the adapters, and I have a blog post that lists out the different lenses that I've tested and the results with those. So if you're interested in that, look for a link right down below. But overall, I would just say it's okay. It really seems to depend on the lens and the adapter, but the odds that you can throw on any old Canon lens and experience this awesome AF system is slim. Not to mention, several of the AF modes just don't work when using adapters like the awesome iAF. The Wi-Fi and NFC work well. It's reliable, fast, and does what I need. You do need to update the remote app via the Play Store to get manual controls. The one installed on the camera is extremely limited. The EVF is wonderful, and being able to see my exposure in real time along with a live histogram as I'm about to take a photo is sweet. Getting a quick review of that photo, even sweeter. So I'm often photographing people at weddings, and I want to make sure I get a shot where their face doesn't look funny. The quick review without taking the camera away from my eye lets me know if I got the shot or if I need to take another. It feels really efficient. The articulating screen is really helpful. Now, I noticed when shooting landscapes in Iceland, people without articulating screens would come out and set their camera on a tripod about eye level because that's where it's easiest to work with. But when you've got this articulating screen, it is much easier to work at levels that aren't eye level to give you a different perspective that helps set your images apart. We do need to touch on a few more of those worries. Battery life I mentioned in the video section. For photos at first, I was shocked at how terrible it was, even with my past experience with Sony. But starting to turn the camera off when I'm not using it, it actually starts up almost as fast as my 5D Mark III wakes up from sleep, and implementing a few other changes, and I feel like battery life is much more manageable. I shot 1,300 photos at the wedding last weekend on 2.5 batteries, and I'm happy enough with that. I also almost always carry a USB battery with me for my phone, and now I can keep my camera charged with that same battery when I'm not using it. I'm going to be releasing a follow-up video on battery life tips along with a really helpful accessory for keeping batteries charged on the go. I will link the accessory below, and I recommend that you subscribe to be notified of those next videos. I have a few thoughts on form factor and control scheme. First, I like the feel of this camera in my hand. No issues with in-hand feel or the grip after shooting a multiple day-long weddings, and there are only a few cameras I can say that about. I think Sony has done a nice job of balancing the size of the grip, and I also haven't had any issues with balance in the hand when using longer lenses. What I am still struggling with is the perfect control scheme. There is a good amount of customization here, but a few buttons do double duty, and I don't love that. More than once I've been moving a focus point and suddenly I'm adjusting the ISO. When I was wandering across Iceland, it really wasn't an issue. I had time to set up the shots, but at a fast-paced wedding, I need reliable control, and I'm not there yet. Though I think I can get there. I just need to figure out how, and when I do, I'll share with you all. I was worried about the robustness of the camera. How well built is it? Well, at the last wedding, I actually dropped it really hard on a hard wooden floor. And despite a ding and an LCD that doesn't quite sit flush, it works just fine. So although that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be fine, but it at least can survive a fairly significant fall. A few additional points that make me happy. The shutter is rated at 500,000 actuations. Silent shutter mode is 100% silent, but it does come with a few drawbacks, including decreased dynamic range, an increased chance of rolling shutter for photos, which makes everything look a little warped, flash compatibility issues, and possibly banding under certain lighting conditions. Now that sounds like a lot of drawbacks, so you may not want to use it. And I've run into the warped look at a recent wedding. It's not good, but I do like that I have the option to shoot 100% silently when I want to. But one more point that does make me happy, the built-in time-lapse. Though I'm grumpy I had to pay $9.99 for it. The app is quite useful with several built-in features that make it way better than just setting X number of photos for X amount of time. And one final gripe, Sony's menu system is a mess. It's clear that new features have been added into the menu with no real thought structure or attempt at real organization. And to add insult on top, I've got no way to make a custom menu item of my favorite features, like I can on Canon or Nikon. It certainly isn't a perfect camera, but it fits my needs and I'm really happy with it. The harder question to answer though is the camera's value on a whole. It's certainly not a cheap camera, but in many ways it provides all of the features that my 5D Mark III and GH4 provide, and it does many of them better. If you're a photographer or someone that likes to shoot a mix of photos and video, it's hard to find any one camera that does as much and does it so well. If you're just a photographer or just a videographer, you could consider some other cameras that might suit you better and save you some money. I've got some suggestions on my site, see the link right down below. And that's it. If you found this review helpful, take a moment to press the thumbs up button. You can also subscribe. I've got videos coming on battery life tips, a closer look at what I want in the first firmware update from the Sony a7RII, and sensor cleaning tips. You can also follow me on Instagram. We've got weekly challenges, and you can see what I'm up to day to day. If you plan to buy, please use the links below. It's a free way to support my work here. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.